going out that door is remarkably stupid. You don't go on contact left. You go out the other side. My name is Eric Terashima.
Hi, I'm Terry Adams.
Dave Berke.
David Harris. Jay Dorleus.
Lamont Christian.
Today we're going to look at scenes from Top Gun,
Iraq war battles,
Military dogs.
Boot camp scenes.
explosions.
Afghanistan war battles in movies and judge how real they are. Landing helicopters in Afghanistan was challenging. Those look to me like CH-47 Chinooks that was frequently used by the Army, heavy lift helicopter, large troop transporter. Some of that looks enhanced just for the movie to make it look more dramatic. An RPG bringing down a helicopter is absolutely realistic, but it has to be a very, very lucky shot. Like you hit a vital system, particularly in a very dramatic crash like that. I would give this clip an 8. The stress and the duress that I felt coming through the actors, as well as the scenario that was depicted. So yeah, they did a pretty good job. Being on horses would be beneficial for fighting in Afghanistan because of the mountainous terrain. You have to go through a lot of elevation changes, hiking up, hiking down. And so horses are going to help you gain more distance more quickly as opposed to wearing yourself out on foot. Later, when I started to go through some advisor training, this is up in the mountains, we would have classes on how to pack mules, for example, and how to butcher animals and cook them out over an open fire. So yeah, we worked on some of those skills.
Hey, where the hell did those come from? How did those not know about a supply line?
Lack of intelligence is what he's concerned about. Like, we should know this. These are capital pieces of equipment. Our networks are so strong in the spy world that they should have had an idea of what was up ahead. And tanks are kind of a big deal. They're loud, they travel long distances, and everyone should know where all of them are. So the advantages are mobile armor, so the occupants are protected, and then a big gun. That's a big advantage. Big disadvantage is that they are road-bound, and they can only go on certain roads, which makes them vulnerable to mines like IEDs. They had tanks, they were Soviet-era tanks that were available and usable by them. By the time I showed up, the coalition forces were so strong, there's no way the enemy could possibly use tanks against us.
Joseph! We've lost air support! Fall back!
People standing up in the middle of a firefight, it's like, you actually don't do that. You want to get down on the ground, right? Because you don't want to get hit. I would give it a 6 for realism. This particular clip on the horses is cool and dramatic, and yeah, and they're charging downhill. But some of the individual tactics kind of made me laugh a little bit.
There's no logical reason for Hadi to lead us down this route unless he's leading us into a trap.
You're out of your bounds, Ahmed. You're here to translate.
Actually, I'm here to interpret.
That's a really great response. Interpreting is so much more than translation. Translation, you're just trying to get the verbatim speech and convey that. Interpreters are much more than that. They become cultural advisors to the people that they're servicing with. And when you start working closely with your interpreters, what happens is you need to form trust with each other. If you don't build that trust, then you may be lacking in the ability to get a full interpretation of what's happening. He's saying, I'm interpreting a cultural thing right here that I'm seeing. I'm seeing how Hadid is acting. He's acting weird. I'm sniffing this guy out. He's being a rat. And by the way, even though your sensors and your patrols and stuff don't see it, this is a bad road to go down. You do not want to do this.
He's a traitor.
In Afghanistan, and actually in all cases, we do have to vet sources of intelligence. What you do is you try to confirm or deny information that they give you as things pass along in time. And so over time, you build up, okay, how often is he lying to us? Because you expect that. And then how and why? That's what a case manager is going to try to do. That's how the vetting process goes. I kind of call BS on that one. If he's going to draw a weapon, the one he's going to do is the rifle that's around his shoulder. And the reason why you do that is because pistols are wildly inaccurate. You've only got this much of a barrel. A lot of pistol fights go off. You see like 20 rounds fired by each side, all misses at this kind of a range. In various degrees, you always have to kind of diffuse tension of some sort. Is he doing a good job? No. If you're trying to de-escalate a situation, drawing your pistol out is not a de-escalation.
He says they have his family.
The risk was pretty high, really high. And particularly my last deployment was 2019 through 2020. I'm in Lashkar Gah, and most of our interpreters were locals from Lashkar Gah. They would kind of sneak on and off the base. Fortunately, we were co-located with an Afghan base, so that's a very simple lie. I'm going to go work on the Afghan base, come in and out, not knowing they're actually working for the coalition forces. So we've got these locals who are extremely at risk. Like if their pictures get out, their names get out, then their families get known, and their families do get threatened. Obviously, I'm still concerned about the ones who are left behind. I still send money on a regular basis to multiple families out there. They need support, and I can't let my friends starve. I'd give it a 4, mainly because this scenario is common enough. What I don't like are the tactics. Person who's trying to de-escalate the situation and instead does an escalatory move, which doesn't make any sense at all. So that's why I gave it a 4.
Just click it. Don't change any settings. Just click it.
Vehicle ambushes were very common in Afghanistan because you're confined to roads that can handle that kind of load. And because of this kind of terrain, it's up in the mountains, everything is canalized. You must go through that road. That makes it a lot easier to ambush vehicles.
Contact left! What do we got?
Contact left means that if I'm here in the driver's seat, that means I'm receiving fire from my left-hand side. Yelling contact left and rolling out that door is remarkably stupid. You don't go on contact left. You go out the other side. Stark should have stayed in the vehicle because what usually will happen is as you're forming defenses during an ambush, the vehicle actually becomes a safe spot. That's where your food is, that's where your water is, that's where your pack is, you know, your supplies and other things. So yeah, the vehicle's absolutely central. It does happen sometimes where you'll have a nearby exploding piece of ordnance and next to nothing happens to you, as opposed to you could just get like utterly destroyed depending on where you show up in the frag pattern is how that works, and this is just dumb luck. I think I'd give this one an 8. There is going to be a deduction for contact left, getting out left, although people do stupid things when they're in duress. Stark should not have left the vehicle either.
Back up! Back up! What's he saying?
You give them props for not having doors on the Humvees. That's a good detail. It's like that's clearly early on where you were doing stuff like that. It would be common to be in bombed-out buildings like that. Just standing out in the open, firing a bunch of rounds, not necessarily the smartest thing to do. You're looking for cover, you're looking for angles, like don't stand right next to each other.
Come on, I got you. Get your hands up!
Tyrese, do you read? Talk to me, Tyrese.
You lucky son of hit your plate. Oh, Jesus.
When that metal hits your plate, that's like someone punching you in the chest, basically, right? So all that force, velocity, and bullet are hitting you, and so you just feel this giant thump. The tactics of the shooting and moving don't make sense to me. I think that could have been depicted a little bit better, so I'm going to give it a 6. The film portrays the Battle of Kamdesh in 2009. That's an absolutely horrible defensive position to be laid down in the middle of a valley with 2 steep cliffs up above you with lots of terrain that you can hide in. One of the first things you would do when you occupy a position like this, at least I would do, is write what's called a fire plan sketch. You put down all the places in the terrain that's surrounding you, like a ledge that an enemy can just peek over. What you would be able to do with this sketch is from any position in your defensive spot, you would know, okay, that ridge right there is 200 yards away from me. And that makes a difference of where you're going to aim, or how you're going to aim, and with what weapon system.
Thompson's down! Thompson's down!
Would it be realistic to have a machine gun that's ready to go under a tarp? Absolutely, it would be. You'd prefer to have somebody on the machine gun at all times. At least I would. I would be doing at least 1 test fire a day just to make sure all my stuff was tight and ready. And I would have rounds at the ready. Any bit of armor in the field helps, especially because this is a gunfight of, yes, you want your personal protective equipment on. Ceramic plate that's on your chest and on your back is designed to stop a 7.62 round at close range. And that kind of thing happened all the time. You're running operations 24 hours a day. You're gonna have to have day sleepers or people who are doing other things. People may be working out. So you go to the bathroom, you take a shower. You're doing all these things, and you're 24 hours at risk. So, yeah, when something happens, it's normal to see folks in maybe their unlaced boots with the flak and helmet on. That's all they got, and their weapon.
Due to weather, Apaches are down. It'll be 2 more hours.
That happens all the time. The terrain is so drastic within Afghanistan. Like here in this depiction, looks like it's kind of sunny, maybe a little bit overcast, but the weather doesn't look all that bad. Well, one mountain range away, it could be just like insane weather. It could be a crazy thunderstorm, windstorm, sandstorm, high winds. An Apache helicopter is an assault aircraft. It carries a Gatling gun and it carries rockets. It's highly maneuverable. It can get in and out of the terrain, and sometimes they already know before they're even coming in what their targets may be looking like because they may have gotten a pre-brief. It's an extra machine gun and rocket firepower that's highly accurate. I'll give it a 9. It's really good. It's really well done.
You want to take a look at this?
What do you see? Let me see. Nice.
Firewatch is a 24-hour manned position, and it's Firewatch because in the Marines, we harken it back to you had to have a fire, and you need to keep the embers going. If you didn't, you were screwed. He called it an OP, so it's an observation post. That's why he's on the binoculars. Binoculars are a whole lot easier to hold up than having a rifle at the ready, and they also have a wider field of view. So if you want to be able to scan large parts of the horizon, binoculars are definitely the way they would be doing that.
You got him!
Typically, you want high-up positions. High-up positions give you better fields of view. They're longer. You can see more. And in some cases, like in this particular one, you've got a lot of standoff between you and the other folks.
No.
Barry Berman!
Barry Berman!
Barry. This is kind of a PTSD trigger moment that this guy's going through. It's a really intense emotional feeling, like you're killing a human being, and oh, by the way, no, you killed 3, and then the guys who are with you are celebrating, like giddy celebrating, which is, for your normal person, being that up close and personal to death is bizarre. One of the issues for me with PTSD is I get overly stimulated. You do kind of have sometimes these out-of-body experiences where you lose track of, like, okay, this is not really good for everyday people to hear or be a part of. It's a selective crowd. I'd give it a 10. I think it was a good depiction of PTSD, absolutely. So we call this victim initiated. Was there a way to detect IEDs in the field before them going off? Yes, absolutely. So frequently what we would do is a patrol like that would be led by somebody sweeping the ground. In this case, for whatever reason, they clearly did not do that.
Jeg har en LCD her. Det er en RC.
Du har den der, du kan se, der er noget antenne, der stikker op.
So RC is radio controlled, kind of like a mine ambush, because it was a well-worn trail, and it was a remote controlled device of some sort. Something got a signal, so it was an active piece. That means down on that IED, there needs to be a power source, there needs to be a battery. That way you got something to close the circuit to detonate the device, and something that would receive that remote detonation piece. How far away does that person need to be? Well, if it's like a garage door opener, they got to be kind of close, right, to get that kind of a distance. If it's more sophisticated, maybe they could be further away. That would be just a basic, like a paintbrush, same thing that like archaeologists will use. You might do that if you're concerned about there being a trigger. So if you're concerned about that, then yes, you want to be very careful around those initiators. On the other hand, there's been times in war where I've seen people see detonation cord. Well, if you're walking around an area like that and you see a red wire-looking thing that has no business being there, that's detonation cord. And that usually means that somebody has set up a bomb near you. And so I've seen guys in the field grab that detonation cord and just yank on it, right, and reel in these bombs.
Så begynder det at komme. Yes, jeg har den. Hostile intent.
What you're talking about is rules of engagement, right? When you can and cannot shoot, why you should or should not shoot. And establishing hostile intent is one of those things. How do you determine that? In this case, to make it really easy on the viewership, it was, this guy's putting a bomb in the middle of the road that's clearly designed for us. I'm gonna give this a 9. That's 100% realistic and happened. And it was funny because she's like, hot, 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 hot. Because, yeah, think about it. You just had an explosion happen in this little chunk of metal. It's hot when it comes down. So this is people in a firefight who are just standing up. Like, what are you doing? You don't do that in the firefight. You get down because you don't want to get shot at, right? You don't want to get hit by a bullet. So I'm laughing at that. Just the tactics don't make any sense. If someone's shooting at you, you're not going to just stand there and be like, hey, yeah, I like getting shot at. This is cool. A javelin is like an anti-tank weapon. Comes in 2 different modes. There's a direct fire mode, and then there's an over-the-top mode, which I think this depicted the over-the-top mode. One of the funny things is that it requires a certain standoff. It's around 150 to 200 meters. Well, that truck was not 150 to 200 meters away. So there's a little bit of that cinematography that you just got to do for Hollywood stuff, I get. So no points off on that one. For realism, I'll give it a 3. Most of the detraction is just from standing up while shooting. You would never do that. My favorite scene that I watched today was from the Outpost. It felt very real to me. The duress of the folks being put into a horrible situation, doing the best they can with it, pretty believable. So I liked it from that standpoint.
My name is Dave Berke. I spent 23 years in the Marine Corps as a fighter pilot, and I spent 3 years as an instructor at Top Gun. I was lucky enough to fly the F-18 Hornet, the F-22 Raptor, and the F-35 Lightning II. Today, we're gonna look at scenes from Top Gun.
Positioning to scramjet.
It's depicting Maverick switch from traditional propulsion engine, just a regular jet engine, to a scramjet engine, which is a really cool concept of something that's gonna make this thing go way faster than a normal airplane. So I love how they do. Well, in the real world, his Mach 10 ejection at the beginning of this movie would be the end of the movie. So that's not gonna be able to be a recoverable situation. You can't eject going Mach 10 and walk away from it. So they took a little creative license, which is okay, but a Mach 10 ejection is not something anybody wants to experience. We'll have to wait and see what is out there, either currently being developed or in the future. But the idea of hypersonic platforms, aircraft, missiles, etc., that is indeed the future. I'm not exactly sure what's out there as we speak, but it's coming. Minus that Mach 10 ejection, which is not the most realistic thing, the rest of the scene is excellent. I love it. I give it an 8.
As briefed, today's exercise is dogfighting. Guns only, no missiles. We do not go below the hard deck of 5,000 feet.
So we have something called the hard deck, where we pretend that's the ground. The hard deck is there to keep people safe. When you're training in a dogfight, you don't want to get so low to the ground that if you make a mistake, you hit the actual ground. That's a terrible way to train. But in the real world, the ground is the lowest you can go. So they set the hard deck at 5,000 feet. So if you hit 4,999 feet, you simulated hitting the ground, you are dead. 5,000 feet's a great number. It gives you that distance from the ground, plenty of room to recover if you had a problem. That would be highly unsafe and dangerous, but boy, it makes for a good clip. Threading the needle between 2 jets that are just a few feet apart is really, really hard to do. But also, this training isn't designed to put the 2 other training pilots into a situation by which they have to react to not getting hit by another aircraft. It's how to coordinate them working together, finding an enemy, maneuvering to be able to shoot that enemy.
Look at that, break. Rooster just saved your life, fellas, but it's gonna cost him.
It was a great maneuver to help out the wingman, but it put Rooster in a pretty tough spot. As you can see, the next thing Maverick does is get a shot on him. This is a great scene depicting a dogfight, and the reason we train dogfighting, you as a pilot have to learn to explore the maximum capability of an aircraft. If you can't fly your jet right at the edge of its capabilities, you're gonna give away an advantage. This is a 2 against 1. We call that section engaged maneuvering, 2 aircraft against an unknown enemy. In this case, Maverick is representing that enemy aircraft. Very realistic.
Where's he going? Leaving your wingman. There's a strategy I haven't seen in a while. For all you folks at home, this is how you bury a fossil.
Good old Hangman leaving his flight lead out to dry. Getting away from your flight lead, getting a bigger perspective, seeing more things, that can be a great thing. There's a little question about if that maneuver is to help your team or to help yourself. I think we know the answer in this particular case with that character. At Top Gun, we don't really see the rogue mentality that's depicted in this movie by either Maverick or Hangman. What you see is a ton of great teamwork, you see a ton of collaboration, you see a ton of humility. I love this clip, I give it a 9. This shows some great maneuvering, some great dogfighting, very, very realistic scenes. The flying is outstanding. If you have to maneuver side to side, you got to get up on what we call a knife edge on the wing of the jet. So when the maneuver happens, you actually turn through the sky more effectively. So when you turn that jet, it keeps inside that really narrow space. They did a great job depicting that. Very realistic. He transitions to what we call a low altitude pop. He's right over the desert at probably 100 feet. That is really, really low. Takes a lot of attention and skill to do that. When he's at the top of that maneuver and rolls upside down to pull toward the target, that's exactly how we teach it. The whole point to that is the higher you climb and the more altitude you have and the higher the angle of climb, the harder it's gonna be to see the target on the ground. So he has to roll upside down so he's looking at the top of the canopy to be able to maintain sight of this target throughout the entire maneuver. He's got to aim these precision laser-guided weapons right onto this very, very small target. And then he finishes off with a very high G maneuver to get back out of that bunkered position. Everything that's done here, we train to, put them all together. Tough scene, tough scenario, tough in real life, very doable, but not easy to do. I'm giving this a 9. I'm probably a tough grader, never gonna give him that perfect 10, but this is about as good as it gets. They did a great job here, really well done. And the benefit you gain is in that particular case, about 10 foot of difference. So let's just go over the top of the bridge and everything's gonna be fine. And it's gonna be a lot safer.
All right, let's go.
When we come back to Top Gun, in the movie Top Gun Maverick, we see that we've now replaced the F-14 Tomcat with the F-18 Hornet. In this case, it's the F-18 E and F Super Hornet. It's also a more maneuverable, a more nimble jet. Now, the F-14 is faster, but the F-18 Super Hornet, as it's evolved, is a very, very formidable, capable machine.
Bob, check your laser. Air to ground check complete. Laser code verified. 1688. Laser is a go. Target acquired. Bombs away.
On the very front of the bombs has what's called a laser detector. It actually sees that laser energy. Of course, we can't see with our eyes, but those bombs can see it. And when they see that, they guide to go right to that pinpoint of a laser. Picture pointing a flashlight at a target, and the bomb goes directly to the center of that beam. Pilots have to fight against. When you pull a lot of G's, the blood starts to drain from your head and starts to pool down in your extremities. Now, as you know, if you don't have any blood in your head, you lose consciousness. Before you have G-lock, you have something called gray out, which means you're still conscious, but all your color vision starts to fade away and things turn gray. And sometimes you see the size of your peripheral vision close in.
I'm sure there's something wrong with this laser! Bombs away! Bombs away!
Dropping without a laser system is not ideal. Now, it's doable, and we brief what we call backup plans. So there's absolutely a scenario where instead of using the laser capability of this bomb, I'm gonna do a traditional regular drop. In this case, it's a tough situation. There's obviously no coming back from this. We gotta get these things off in the very first pass. So, not very common, and maybe a little unrealistic, but absolutely something we'd plan for. Short of that bridge, this thing is a great clip. It's a 9.
Here it comes!
Flares work against infrared missiles, ones that look for heat signatures, and the flare is designed to mask or cover your engines. The missiles being shot in this scene are radar-guided missiles. It looks really cool in the scene, but those flares would have no effect on the missiles being shot at them because they're not looking for heat signatures.
Break right, payback, break right! Breaking right! Oh my God, here they come!
Having to dodge a missile is a really tough thing to do and often doesn't work out in our favor. The ideal situation is before we're getting shot is to avoid that missile's detection situation or try to take out the radar that's targeting you. So while those missiles might be there, the radar that's guiding those missiles, if we can take that out, we render those missiles useless.
What about Maverick? Tell him there's nothing he can do for Maverick, not in a F-18.
I would not want to get shot at by a missile. I've been shot at before, not by surface air missiles. It's not fun at all. But if I had to pick an airplane to get shot at, I definitely prefer to be in the F-18 with the capability it has. The F-18 has evolved, has systems on the airplane that are more advanced, better detection, probably a little better maneuverability, but more importantly, a better situation to understand what's happening so they can react sooner and more effectively. I give this scene a 7 for realism, but this scene gets a 20 for emotion and for action.
There's 300 breakers back here. Anything more specific?
I don't know. That was your dad's department.
I love how they depicted Rooster in the back of this F-14 having no idea what's going on. That'd be very realistic. I think if you took a current student, certainly a pilot, and put him in the back of a vintage 60s, 70s, or 80s airplane, he would be lost, just like they showed in the movie.
His wingman is moving into a weapons envelope.
A weapons envelope is simply the range at which you can shoot a weapon. We are taught and trained at Top Gun, each aircraft weapon system, the gun, and different types of missiles all have envelopes. We memorize those envelopes, we train in those envelopes, and we maneuver to fly in and out of those envelopes to maximize our ability to kill an opponent. So that's depicted really well here.
What the?
What they're really trying to show is what we call super maneuverability, this ability to almost cartwheel through the sky that a 4th-gen airplane like an F-18 simply can't do. But that maneuver can absolutely be done. If you've watched the latest F-22 Raptor airshow demo, you'll see what I'm talking about.
We gotta get low. The terrain will confuse his targeting system.
Getting down towards the ground and the trees, especially if the enemy is above you, can cause problems. In a 5th-generation modern radar, that radar doesn't really care where you are. It's gonna see you, it's gonna find you, it's gonna maintain lock. So confusing his targeting against a modern 5th-gen fighter, not gonna happen. How they chose to handle it, it's probably the best they can do. I'm giving this clip a 5. I'd like to make it a little bit higher because it is a great action scene, but the things that are happening simply are not gonna happen in the real world. They have no nose landing gear and no tail hook. This is a bad situation to be in. So they literally have no options in this situation. They have to barricade it, but this is very different from the typical arresting gear that catches the hook and brings the jet to a normal stop. Arresting gear is very, very reliable. There are times, very rarely, where it doesn't work. So that barricade is the same one we use on a real carrier. It's basically a big, giant net that captures the plane. I'm gonna give it an 8. Now, the newer movie, Top Gun Maverick, it has really evolved, much more realistic, much better flying scenes, much better job depicting how things actually work. Overall, I give it an 8.
Got Big 1. I'm going after Big 2.
I lost him in the sun.
Fighter pilots definitely use the sun to their advantage. If it's available and you can put yourself up into the sun and make it difficult for an enemy to see you, it's a great thing to do.
Lock up, baby. Lock up. I got him locked. Bingo.
The aircraft that you're flying in has something called a radar warning receiver, and it tells you the different modes the other jet is looking at. So it tells you if it's searching you, if it's locked you up, or if it's about to shoot you. A little bit of a guess, but it definitely indicates as things get worse and the aircraft that's shooting at you is getting closer to launching that missile.
Do I have permission to fire?
Do not fire until fired upon.
As a Top Gun instructor, I would have told this pilot long before that situation when he can and can't fire. We have something called the rules of engagement, ROE. So the fact that they're asking you the question is understandable, but you would never ask that question in the middle of a dogfight. You'll know going into that fight, long before you take off, what the rules are and when you can and cannot fire.
Watch the birdie.
That is a cool looking movie clip. You can certainly fly upside down. You can see the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds do that. In a real situation, you'd need a lot more space between the planes. First of all, they might actually hit each other. Second, it'd be really hard to maneuver. And third, if someone looked up and saw a plane directly above them, they'd probably turn their jet immediately, and that'd be a problem really for both of them. You just can't get that close in the real world. Cougar is definitely having some problems getting that F-14 back aboard the ship. As a former Top Gun instructor and as a landing signals officer, I was responsible and trained to help bring jets back aboard the carrier. In real life, Cougar's not getting anywhere near that ship, at least not the way that airplane is moving. I'm gonna ask him to start over, get back out there, smooth that jet out a little bit. But to give him credit, he just had a pretty tough situation. He was obviously very nervous and pretty uncomfortable. So good for Cougar for bringing that jet aboard. A couple of those things that are happening, flying that close, probably not in real life. Trying to land on the carrier, that dangerous, probably not gonna happen. It's an awesome clip, but probably a 4 for realism.
I lost him. I'm looking. I got him. He's on our tail, coming hard.
In that environment, I'm definitely gonna be scanning up, down, left, and right, and I'm gonna try to get my head out of the cockpit looking around as much as possible. So that's pretty realistic.
When you hit the brakes, he'll fly right by. Woo!
I'll hit the brakes, he'll fly right by is a legendary line from the movie. It is not a real thing in an actual dogfight. There are some real advantages to being able to fly slow and being maneuverable at slow speeds. You slowing down, it wouldn't happen instantaneously. Another big problem with you slowing down or hitting the brakes is they can do the same thing and keep that position, and you're now even slower, less maneuverable, and even more predictable. But as is depicted, you can't have someone 1,000 feet behind you and just hit the brakes and they'll jump right out in front of you. It's just not very realistic.
Tower, this is Ghost Rider requesting a flyby.
Negative, Ghost Rider. The pattern is full.
A Top Gun student would absolutely get in trouble for doing an unauthorized flyby, and it'd be a lot more trouble than he got in the movie. That'd probably be what we call your last flight. If that was a real Top Gun student, we would thank him for showing up at Top Gun, and we'd probably send him on his way. Overall, I'm giving it a 4. Some of the fights are pretty realistic. The flyby is not happening.
Stay with Hollywood, Mav. We're his cover. Don't you leave me, Maverick. Hollywood, you're looking good. I'm going after Viper.
Well, in this case, the wingman leaving isn't necessarily the worst thing. One of the things he realizes is there's another enemy out there, and if they ignore it, maybe that guy that they see ends up being a problem for them. So I have no real issue with him leaving. You don't be a good wingman and provide cover by being 10 feet away flying in formation from your lead. You try to get away from them, and what you're looking for is exactly what Maverick and Goose did here, which is find an unseen enemy aircraft. And if that happens, you absolutely do need to leave your wingman. So he's doing a pretty good job here of what we call providing mutual support. He's helping out even though he's not flying next to him anymore. We did head-to-head training at Top Gun all the time. We called it a high-aspect merge. One aircraft pointing at another, going right past each other. That was a very common training, very realistic training, and also very fun training we did at Top Gun. Viper, in this case, is flying in a plane called an A4 Skyhawk. It's well represented. It's what Top Gun used in the 80s to replicate enemy aircraft. The A4 is much smaller, it's much more nimble, and much more maneuverable than the F-14. And to have a dogfight in that aircraft, that's gonna be a problem fighting against an A4, especially against the commander of Top Gun.
Keep coming. Still close for missiles, Goose. I'm switching to guns.
That's pretty realistic. Missiles have what's called a minimum range. And the reason that is because when the missile launches off your jet, it needs a little bit of time to arm up and have that warhead be available to detonate against an aircraft. If he tried to fire a missile from that distance, it might not detonate. So it won't have the effect that he's looking for.
Hold it. Goose, check our tail. There's Chester.
Bingo, Maverick's dead.
The key mistake that Maverick and Goose made is a mistake a lot of students make. We call it target fixation. They're focusing all their efforts on Viper. In this case, you've got two people in the cockpit. Goose doesn't really need to be helping Maverick. Let Maverick do his job of dogfighting Viper, and tell Goose to get his head out, look outside, and look for that enemy you don't see, which is typically the enemy that causes the biggest problem. I'm giving this scene an 8. This is a very realistic scene. A couple of small errors, but they did a good job on this one.
We're in his jet wash.
So jet wash is when the exhaust of the engines of the aircraft in front of you go directly down your intakes or go into your engine. Yeah, avoiding jet wash in the real world usually isn't a very big problem. It happens sometimes, and most pilots will tell you when you fly through someone's jet wash, you feel a bit of a thump. It can be a little uncomfortable, but it's very easy to avoid for the most part, mostly because you see the pilot and the aircraft in front of you, and you just put yourself in a position to not be directly behind them.
We're out of control. This is not good. This is not good.
Mayday, mayday. Mav's in trouble. He's in a flat spin. He's heading out to sea.
A flat spin's not a good thing. The first thing you typically do is what we call neutralize the controls. It just means you just let go. You're not pressing on the rudders. You're not putting inputs with the control stick. You're just letting go of the controls. And oftentimes the very next thing you want to do is bring the throttles all the way back to idle to slow the jet down. I'm a little disappointed in Maverick here. He's fighting against the aircraft. I think Maverick might be adding to some of the problems they're experiencing in this clip.
What's the canopy?
If you have to eject, God forbid, you want to sit straight up, you want to tilt your head up a little bit, be in a good, stiff, firm body position for that really violent ejection that's about to happen. I'm lucky enough to have never had to eject from an actual aircraft. But once you pull that handle, a rocket fires the canopy and launches the canopy off the jet, and then very shortly after, another rocket shoots the seat up out of the airplane. In the case of an F-14 Tomcat, the backseater goes first, and then the pilot goes second. So there's a sequence to that too, but all of those situations are very violent and can be very dangerous for the people inside.
Oh no!
Well, what I saw from that landing over water unfortunately happens sometimes. You have that ejection, and your first thing when you eject is you gotta land in the water. The first thing you wanna do is get into your raft, and I think Maverick's priority was, as soon as he could get in the water, swim over to his buddy, try to help him out, try to pull him into his raft or pull him into some safety. We all know what happened to poor Goose on that case, though. Every naval aviator has had practice simulating landing in the water, getting out of your parachute, and getting into a raft. It is not fun. It is not easy. It is a tough challenge. I'm gonna give this scene a 5.
Right left! I'm hit! I'm hit! We're coming apart! I can't control it! 090, 20, we're going down!
A lot of the missiles that are shot are what's called heat-seeking or infrared missiles, and the thing that produces the most heat on an aircraft is the engine. So it's very common in those heat-seeking missiles, those infrared missiles, to fly right at the tailpipe of an aircraft and blow up those engines.
Just flew right through his jet wash! Good recovery, Mav.
Mav did a little better this time with that jet wash. I still wish he would just relax a little bit and not over-control the aircraft. But in this case, he was able to recover the jet before it flamed out and got into that spin, and it got him back into the fight. So good job, Mav.
Now!
So Maverick uses and employs his classic signature move of hitting the brakes and getting the enemy to fly right by. Maybe not the most realistic thing, it's probably not actually gonna happen, but in this movie, really what they're showing is they're trying to catch this enemy aircraft off guard. This MiG-28 pilot doesn't know Maverick, doesn't know his style, and he's shocked to find himself in one instance behind Maverick about to shoot, and then with the snap of a fingers, he's now in front. I'm gonna give this scene a 7. A couple things not quite right, but I love how dynamic and how violent this 2 against 5 scenario is. Very difficult situation. There's a lot of maneuvering, very aggressive scene. I would think most fighter pilots from my generation can look back at the original Top Gun and say, that was the motivation, that's what started it all for many of us. Overall, I'm giving it a 7. My favorite scene from the Top Gun movies is that first dogfighting scene in Top Gun Maverick. Because in the real world, the instructors do a much better job than the students do initially, and I really like how he showed the students they need to be humble fighting against Maverick. With all his experience and all his skill and talent, the students didn't really stand a chance, and he showed that to them in that scene. It's a great scene.
My name is Dorleus, and I was a first sergeant in the United States Army. I spent 2 separate deployments to Iraq. I was mainly doing route clearance, looking for IEDs, and also disposing of IEDs. Today, we're going to look at Iraq war battles from movies and TV shows. Right, so the formation that they're using right here to patrol through the city is not one that I recommend nor have I ever seen done downrange. Because what you have here is just a cluster of people just walking down the street. And all it takes is a grenade or an RPG to be fired at them, and they would take multiple casualties. When in reality, what they should be doing is either push the vehicles ahead of them or push the vehicles behind them. And then between the personnel themselves, they should have at least 5 meters standoff in between them. If I have any suspicion that a vehicle-borne IED is coming towards me, the first thing I'm going to do is take cover. Because when it does go off, shrapnel is going to go everywhere. If you're just standing on the road like these guys were, you're probably going to get hit by something. They were essentially in a line firing out the car, and then Chris Kyle is firing from above. They're in his line of fire, right? So a lot could have gone wrong with just them standing in the road like that. In reality, what they should have done was get behind cover and then engaging the car. And then for as many times as they engaged it, they should have hit the driver. Suicide bombers were a common threat in Iraq because it's one of the tools that they found was very effective. And it's harder for us to detect and defeat because you literally have a moving bomb heading towards you. In the streets of Iraq, at any given time, you have, hundreds of cars just parked there. That's one technique that they would use also, is they would, pack the cars with bombs and just leave them sitting on the side of the roads where they know we typically go out on patrols, and then once we go by it, they set it off. What I've experienced in Iraq, typically when they put bombs in the cars, the bottom of it is sagging because that's where all the load is. So that's something that we look out for, but it didn't have any of the signs that I typically see downrange.
Calling in. This is Real 2 Bravo, requesting ordnance drop. Grid number 0, fire away.
So typically when you call in an airstrike, things are going bad. Like, you really need rounds on target right away, or else you're gonna be dead. The way that was portrayed is also not accurate, right? Because Chris Kyle wouldn't have the authority to just say, hey, put rounds on target, right? That's a ground force commander's decision, mainly because once you release that round, like, you're owning it.
Target missed.
There's a lot of things that plays into account as for why they missed it. Sandstorm's probably the main reason. When it comes to putting rounds on the objective, with a sandstorm like this, they probably weren't able to properly laze their target because the aircraft itself has certain lasers on it that they can use to actually pinpoint where the round's supposed to go. So the sandstorm could have threw the laser off to where it wasn't properly lased or didn't have clear visual of it. Between Chris Kyle and his sniper buddy, somebody should have what we call an ISLID on their person to where they can mark where they want the rounds to go. Sandstorm do happen pretty frequently, especially during the summer. Typically, once the sandstorm comes around, everybody's hunkered down because you can't see anything. You got to know where your rounds are going at all times. So if we can't clearly identify where the rounds are going, then yeah, we're not shooting at anybody. We'll probably just hunker down and wait for it to pass. I would give American Sniper a 5 out of 10, mainly because of the realism with the VBIED, and then also the technique that these guys use as they were patrolling just didn't make any sense. So that's what we call indirect fire, meaning the enemy is anywhere from 200 to 300 meters away and they are launching mortar rounds, either 60s or 81 millimeter mortars towards the convoy. It's a tactic that the enemy used a lot because they set up the IED, and then once it goes off, it disables the convoy being all the vehicles that are moving through, and then they're able to lob mortars and cause additional damage.
Go! Move, cover right, go!
Having a turret system which allows you to maneuver the gun or shift the gun from left to right is beneficial because it allows you to, transition from covering your element as it moves. He either hit a landmine, and the landmine had to be, situated just right to hit, around the fuel tank for it to cause that big of a fireball. But in this situation right here, the only thing I could think of is, he ran over a landmine. Landmines were very common to find in Iraq. And one of my first missions was actually low crawling to a landmine and going through my procedures as a 12 Bravo to dispose of it. And it's all leftover munitions from like previous conflict that that country has been part of. So they're digging fighting positions, right? Especially in an open terrain like this, digging that hole gives them the ability to lay down and essentially hide from the enemy. It gives them cover, right? And all they got to do then is just pop up and then engage the enemy while their body is still concealed. I would give this a 7.
The sniper! Hey, sir! Where is he? He's right up there! Take it down the alley!
That actually happens a lot. Iraq is a lot more urbanized than Afghanistan. You won't typically find snipers just laid out on the ground, right? As opposed to urban area, they have buildings, they have, stores. They have a bunch of different places that they can hide. But typically you won't notice a sniper or find a sniper unless he wants you to know that he's there. So as soon as he cracks off that first shot, then that's when you'll know, hey, we have a sniper on our hand. And by then somebody's already hit.
I want you to stay right on the backs of your shooters, all right? They will take you in.
So he's talking about a stack. So a stack is, like a group of 4 guys, and they typically go and they clear a building. So if he's telling them to stay on the back of his shooters, then he wants them right behind either the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 man, and then he'll just go into the building with them. Personally, when I'm conducting CQB, I don't want anybody touching me or on my back. I'd rather go in, clear the building first, and let you know, hey, it's clear, you could come in.
This is no WMD site.
There's never been any evidence found that Iraq actually had WMDs. So the whole WMD debacle, I'll say, that caused us to go into Iraq. I remember in 2003, I was actually around Haditha Dam, which was one of the places that we thought WMDs were being stored. And it's disappointing to later on find out that it didn't exist, right? So we essentially went in under false pretenses, lost a bunch of soldiers. I lost some good friends, for the cause that we thought was righteous, and that ended up not being the case. I would give this a 4 out of 10, mainly because of how they handled the sniper. Everyone was out in the open with a sniper on the loose. He could have easily just, picked everyone off before they even made it to the building where the sniper was actually hiding. When he says control your fires, that just means, hey, don't shoot all your ammunition at once. Make sure you choose a string of fire that makes sense, right? Typically, a basic combat load for a soldier is 210 rounds, right? That's what we carry on our person whenever we go out on missions. So that's 7 magazines. You don't want to run out of ammunition. It happened to me a couple of times. 8 to 10 hour battles, you're gonna run out of ammunition. What we teach soldiers is to make sure the guns talk, right? So you want the guns to talk, meaning I fire 3 rounds, I stop, he fires 3 rounds, right? And then it just goes down the line. So, and then we repeat. We all don't want to stop firing at once, right? So we want to take turns. It's probably the most accurate, scene I've seen as far as gun battles. There's a lot of standoff, and they're just engaging rounds back and forth. That's your typical engagement in Iraq during the time period that I was there. What you saw there was an AT-4. It is a common issue items for infantry guys, and it was used properly too. You want to make sure you have standoff. That's getting them away from the walls so they have enough clearing for the rounds to go off. All right, and then before they fire it, they check their back blast, make sure nobody's behind them. That is an accurate depiction of what happens if you're triggered by PTSD. My PTSD took on the form of anger. So I was, going, out drinking, and I was getting into a lot of bar fights. Cops would go to arrest my buddy. I would jump on the cop, and next thing you know, I'm in handcuffs. So I had to seek help to, get me in the right state of mind, right? To refocus my state of mind. And that help came in the form of me getting thrown into jail. But it worked, because 20 years later, here I am.
12 o'clock, what do you see? Beyonce, Destiny Child, dude, right in front of you.
He doesn't really know where he's at. So his buddies had to calm him down and then refocus him. You're not on the battlefield anymore, right? So that is a pretty accurate depiction. Different people requires different things. In this particular situation, that's what that guy needed, right? But every soldier is different, and your fellow soldiers will know exactly how to bring you back. I would rate this a 9 out of 10 because they do a really good job at the rooftop battle scene and also depicting what actually happens when you have a PTSD episode.
Got that?
Yeah.
There we go.
During the beginning of the war, we started to incorporate robots. This one specifically is what we call a Talon, right? And the whole premise behind it was to limit soldiers actually getting injured, because prior to, we were using mine detectors and going up and looking for IEDs in that manner, and guys were getting injured left and right. So it was a lifesaver.
Good to go. All right, wagon set up, bot moves. Wagon's having a bad day, boys.
So I've never had one of those, nor have I ever used one of those before. And for that exact reason, it doesn't really travel well over terrain. In Iraq, the terrain is rarely even. And it was time to go put, charge on whatever device that we were gonna put the charges on. We just built a little handle on the actual charge and it went on the claw. And that's how we were able to put the charge on the actual bomb, not on the wagon like they used in the clip here.
Burn him, Eldridge! I can't get a shot!
When you start talking about IEDs, you have two separate ways that they can be initiated. You have victim initiated, which is pressure plate or command det wire. And then you have remote control, which in this case, it was remote control. We do have devices that are supposed to mitigate them being able to remotely activate the IEDs. We call them jammers. It's like a big antenna that sends out all these different signals, and if it doesn't recognize the signal, it jams the frequency to where it can't get to the IED. It can't close the loop. So I would give this one a 4. Just the realism of him actually going up and putting the charge on the IED wasn't accurate at all.
Faster! Faster! We'll lose your man! We'll lose your man!
Triangle of Death was an incredibly dangerous area that was located south of Baghdad. Fallujah was one of those places. I actually spent some time there in 2004, and the IED threat and also the insurgent threat down there was ridiculous. All of Saddam's loyal fighters were all around that area, and they were very experienced. We had a bunch of different units responsible for doing different things. For example, we knew there was an IED threat. So we enlisted, combat engineers like myself to go clear the routes. And then we also had infantry guys going out on patrols every morning and the evening to deter the enemy from actually coming out. There weren't people necessarily behind us, chasing us and firing at us. It was coming from the sides, right? So they would set up ambushes, and as vehicles are driving down the road, they would engage them through that manner. I would rate this a 5 out of 10. How the highway chase scene was depicted, that's not something that those guys do. And if they did, these guys would not have made it out of there. Roadside IEDs were very common in Iraq. They were almost part of our daily lives. We wake up, eat breakfast, and then go defuse roadside IEDs. So they would place these IEDs in a variety of places. And as the war progressed, their techniques got more and more complicated, because as we discover a technique that they were using, they adjust and they found another way. It was like playing chess. So they started off placing them on the side of the roads. Then they realized that we found a way to easily detect them on the side of the road. Then they started putting them in the middle of the roads and potholes and puddles of water. Once we found out how to defuse those, then they started putting them in coverts to where we couldn't even see them. Based on what I saw in this scene, this IED was on the side of the road, because when the IED went off, it pushed the vehicle and it flipped it a couple of times. If it was in the middle of the road, it would have pushed the vehicle up and essentially just disintegrated. This IED was probably triggered using what we like to call command detonation. So in a desert situation like this, you need an aiming point. So you as the bad guy could have enough standoff and you know when to send it off, right? So as the vehicle comes, let's say I'm using a pole. As the first vehicle travels down the road, as soon as it hits that aiming point, which is a pole, then I know to set it off. They had command wire probably unraveled, and then once they saw the vehicle hit the aiming point, they pulled the igniter, and that's how they were able to set it off. You can literally see the wire if you're trained to look for it. And a lot of these units would have issues because they didn't have the trained eye that a combat engineer would, where we went to school to learn how to look for these things, right? They would just drive down the road and then get blown up. I would give this a 7 out of 10. The IED scene was on point. They could have done a lot better job at the follow through after the IED went off.
Hey, eyes. Just check that the
Just looking at the scene itself with him just standing out in the open, Kevlar's not properly secured. There's just a lot wrong with it right off the bat. His chin strap is supposed to be buckled, and it was just dangling. It's supposed to be buckled and fastened to where if he does have to run, it's not falling off.
Get away from me, man! No!
I understand what he was doing there, but there's a more efficient way he could have done that. And that's to just get down and just low crawl. He had enough cover. He could have easily just got behind or in some of those brushes and kind of made his way to John Cena that way. You're running the zigzag pattern. All he has to do is anticipate where you're going to be next, and he ambushes you and he shoots you right then and there. So no, that's not accurate at all as far as how that could have been done. It's hard to identify a sniper in a setting like this, especially if he's trained. He's just going to lay down, and he can be 1,000 meters away. Like, you're not finding him, right? So you either get air support overhead, or you just spray the area with rounds and hope for the best. But there really isn't a good way to identify a sniper from the road, right? Especially if he's that far away. Once he shoots, you'll see dust kick off if he's not properly concealed. As soldiers, they teach us self-aid, meaning if I get hit in the leg, it's my job to take care of this wound. All right, so that's what he should have been doing. Instead of falling on the ground, all dramatic, he should have went to work and dressed his wound. There's a Humvee right there, so he could have crawled to that Humvee out of sight, out of mind of that sniper. There's absolutely no reason why his buddy, had to make the mad dash. I would rate this a 4 out of 10. None of it made sense to me at all. So this clip depicts the Battle of Nasiriyah when the United States Marines were pushing north towards Baghdad and they got ambushed. And this is significant because it ended up turning into a 2 weeks long engagement with the insurgents. Fighting along the river banks in Iraq is something that happened a lot. Some of the advantage would be just cover, right? Because you have all the vegetation there. So you're able to mask yourself from enemy fire a lot better. But you also got to figure too, whatever advantages we have, they also have, because they also have cover on the other side, right? The one thing they didn't have were those Humvees with 50 cals on top of them and the gunners being able to see above that vegetation. So part of what we would do as guys conducting route clearances, we would search for what we call weapons cache. Weapons cache means we're looking for weapons that have been buried. What they do is they take all the weapons and all the munitions that they have and they go bury them. So what we would then do as engineers is we would pull out our mine detectors and we would go look for them. And they always like burying them around the riverbed. So when we would go dig them up, they would engage us from across the river.
Whole battalion is 2 clicks east of us on the other side of the Garaf Canal.
It is possible for a company to take a wrong turn and get lost in Iraq. You got to keep in mind that we don't know the terrain. We have what's called Blue Force trackers. That's the screen that he was looking at. And it's supposed to tell you where on the map you are. And those things break a lot. It happened to a convoy that I was in. We were able to call ahead and let the element know that, hey, we got separated. We need you guys to stop until we're able to catch up. And they did just that.
They hate America, man. I said we call in some air, some cobras, them up.
There is no air.
They seem to distrust this particular interpreter because he is not just translating, he's also inputting his 2 cents into what the soldiers should be doing. And that's not what he's there for. He's there to just relay the message coming from us as soldiers to the local population. I would rate this scene from Generation Kill a 9 out of 10. What they should have done immediately was get into those buildings and get on the rooftops, because that's where the fight is being fought. Them staying in the corridor right there gives the insurgency fire superiority, and they're just fish in a bucket essentially, right? Just firing down on them. I was in Tikrit from 2007 to 2008. That's when I spent my 15-month deployment. And the city is correctly depicted here with the tight corridors, the rooftops, and every day it was a battle in that place. It took some really heavy fighting to finally get that place under control. It was Saddam's hometown. So the folks there were a lot more loyal to Saddam. That intensified the firefights that would take place in that town. Like, they did not want to go down easy. So that's what made it very different in my eyes. So in situations where Humvees get blown up, unless they're all gone, then we'll just, hunker down and call for support from base camp, because we can't just leave them on the side of the road. We can't take off on foot, because now we're leaving government equipment behind and we're running from the enemy, and we just don't do that.
Steve, don't go in there!
We had a guy run into a building by himself with no battle buddy with him to cover his back. It takes 2 people to properly clear a room. As soon as I go left, my buddy needs to go right, because if I go left and nobody goes right, who's to say there's not a guy right that'll shoot me in the back? I would rate this a 5 out of 10. The tactics used in this clip didn't make any sense. My favorite clip that I watched today was from Billy Lynn, and it's because of the rooftop firefight and how accurate it was.
Hi, I'm Terry Adams, and this is Tiny, 9-year-old Belgian Malinois. She is trained dual-purpose dog, trained in tracking, detection for narcotics, and apprehension. I am a 8-year Army dog handler with also 10 years of civilian handling and instructing experience. Today, we'll be looking at military dogs in movies and TV.
Look left.
Cerberus left.
Really, honestly, it's pretty spot on. The only thing that would be different would be, in my experience, is directing the dog with a laser versus letting them free sniff. The dog being able to climb the ladder and hop into the window and then search from there with direction, all that's realistic.
He's got something.
That is totally realistic. If the dog is sent into a building and sees a threat, then the job of the dog is to apprehend. The dog does target the arm. We do train them to apprehend from the arm and the leg. The things that we use are going to be a hidden sleeve. In this scene, the subject is actually using a hidden sleeve. That's how he's taking that bite without actually being bitten.
Check here. I found him.
2 bodies.
When it comes to tracking a scent, a dog is awesome, especially in the conditions that they were in. The canopy holds a lot of odor, which makes it even easier for dogs to track. When it comes to my military experience, we have tracked more or less not insurgents, but we tracked more explosives, from the source of the explosive to maybe where someone is sitting ready to ambush. So yes, you can use clothing to search for a familiar smell for the dog. It doesn't have to be a living person, it can also be a dead person as well. I definitely give it a 10 out of 10. Some of the things, if you notice that the dogs are targeting the arms and legs, you see that there's some stomach shots. So, if the dog can't get to the arm or leg, then they're going to go for another area for sure. You see the 2 Belgian Malinois being worked together. The Belgian Malinois is an awesome dog. Before, the Shepherd was the go-to dog. Now the Belgian Malinois has replaced the Shepherd based off of speed, stamina, size. They're not as big as the Shepherd would be. Pretty bad. But this is not as common to teach. But once again, if the dog can't get your leg or arm, it's gonna go for wherever it can get a solid bite. Scaling the wall to bite the subject is very realistic. In the military, it wouldn't be so realistic, only because if we had a threat up high, we would just neutralize that threat. But if we wanted to get a dog up high, that is a possibility. You see a lot of crossfire from a lot of the good guys and the bad guys. The dogs probably wouldn't have lasted very long in the real world. Probably within, after the first or maybe second bite, they would have been shot by someone. Realistically, we wouldn't put our dogs freely in danger of a lot of that. They'll be sent to a specific target and then brought back to us to make sure that we're not getting any crossfire. These dogs are really desensitized to gunfire. Would have been also great to watch them have ear and eye pro based off of the new technology that's provided today. I'm going to give that a 7 out of 10. There's a lot of shooting going on, and normally a handler isn't going to put their dog in harm's way of that many guns.
Oh, and Dennis, can you pull out some of your people for us? Confuses the dog's nose.
They're searching a building. They have everyone leave. Normally, we would not necessarily detain everyone, but we would isolate everyone to a certain area. So in that way, we know no one's physically going to harm us as we search the building, or try to figure out a way to throw the dog off as we're doing it. This is a DEA dog, and they're looking for meth narcotic. The handling from the handler wasn't all that great. He did a lot of touching stuff. In the real world, especially in the civilian world, a little more than military, it's a big liability to sit there and touch the objects that you're wanting the dog to search, because you can cause the dog to give a false indication. You want to minimize as much as possible your manipulation of the dog. So when conducting a building search, we would let the dog free search, then we will come back and detail. When we detail, we would stay off of the object, but point towards where we want the dog to search.
How long we gotta be quiet down here?
They're gone.
We're good.
So here we see the dog doesn't indicate on possible narcotics. Just means that the dog wasn't in the best area for a sniff. Now, with the narcotics being a floor under, the dogs can catch the odor with it being a floor under, but it would have to be in a productive space, which are areas where odor collects, and the dog can then track it to source. We'll give that handler a 3 out of 10 for his handling skills.
Hey, kid, stop!
The dog is barking. That can be a sign of the dog having odor to a explosive. We like a little bit calmer alerts when it comes to explosives, just because of how volatile they are. And with something like that, that it's either a mine or an IED, right? Improvised explosive. We don't want to do anything that can trigger that explosive to go off. Most times our indicators are going to be a down or a sit instead of a barking, just because we want that calm behavior. And based off of the placement of the odor is how they indicate. So if it's something that's lower to the ground, they will perform a down. If it was something that was higher up into a ceiling or high placed into a wall, they're doing a sit.
Seek, Dex. Seek! Come here. Seek. Attaboy. Seek.
You see that the handler says to the dog to go seek. It is a common word, Zeke, Zook, find it. These are all common words that are used throughout the military and civilian to go and search for an odor. Find it.
What is that?
You see that there's a Labrador. This is a common choice of breed for an explosive detection dog. The reason why they make really good explosive detection dogs are, one, nice in nature, very high driven, very good at hunting odors, rather if that's an explosive, narcotics, or even a bird. The handling of the dog would have been different, definitely. The dog would have been a little further out from the handler. Most of these dogs are used to clear routes where there were old minefields, or just routes that are known for insurgents to place IEDs. We would want the dog to be a good distance so that we can save the handler just in case the dog trips the explosive.
All right, good boy, no booms, good dog.
Words of encouragement are a big thing for dogs. In these situations, you're not able to reward the dog physically with a tug or a ball, some sort of toy. When we train these dogs, we teach these dogs that explosives or narcotics equal this big reward, this toy. And so that's why they are so willing and eager to go out and find these explosives. In this scene, you see that the dog is a little bit more vocal. It's not a deal breaker. Biggest thing is we understand that these dogs are working off a motivation of a toy, which is what causes the frustration, and that's where you get those barks from. I would give it an 8 out of 10. Reason for not having a 10 out of 10 is based off of the handling of the dog.
Found something! Good boy.
The way she's utilizing the dog is all correct. We didn't necessarily use flags. We used chem lights though. If we did do a flag, it was a makeshift flag out of rocks and reflective tape, where we would just drop it at a known area of interest. And we used the chem light to mark how far from said IED.
Clear. Levy, check the vehicle.
I've actually been in a situation similar to this without the explosion. My dog passed an IED because of the wind current. We were traveling north to south, and the wind current was going north to south. So with the odor being pushed past us, and me and my dog actually walked right over an IED. My dog caught it about 50 yards, and he picked it up going back. But the IED was rigged for MRAPs, and our little weight wasn't big enough to trigger it, but we could have definitely been in a situation like that. Megan Levy and her dog partner were wounded from an IED. The military uses dogs commonly for this reason, to be able to protect soldiers from being hurt or killed, which is why one of the reasons why we trained the dog to work at a greater distance from us. She was a little bit on the luckier side. Based off my experience, I have lost a dog from an IED. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10, based off the equipment, based off of the situation itself.
You remember me? It's your favorite chew toy from 2015.
A lot of the military working dogs are fairly temperamental. I definitely have a few bites on me currently from dogs when I was in the service that going in leashing them, and they decided to go ahead and bite me. So we do use muzzles quite a bit for more aggressive dogs. Typically in the beginning, when you first meet your dog, you're not meeting them with a muzzle on. Just because of the establishment of a bond, we don't want to stress the dog out with having a muzzle on. Now, if it's a very high risk dog, then yes, we would put a muzzle on, just because we know that that particular dog is more than likely going to bite you.
And you're gonna go on a little road trip. 1,500 miles. Just to act like your daddy's looking down on us from above.
As the handler approaches this dog, he approaches slowly. We would want to approach a little bit more confidently, just to show the dog that we're not giving off any fear so the dog doesn't take advantage. The voice, the way he's speaking to the dog is all correct. We don't want to come in with a harsh tone, but we also don't want to come in with a passive tone as well. We want to come in with a confident, inviting tone.
All right, I'm gonna leash you up. All right? Be cool.
He gets down to the dog's level. Wouldn't necessarily get down to the dog's level as in face to face, only because that's a very big risk. But also we don't want to come in and hover the dog as a dominant and showing a dominance play. Realistically, he could do this, but he would put himself into more of a dangerous situation with having a dog right in his face.
What are y'all so scared of? She's mellowed out big time.
Hey, man, I forgot to tell you not to touch her on the ears, man. I left that part out.
Most dogs don't really care about their ears. It's just every dog has its own trigger. It could be its paws, it could be leg, rubbing the side of them, putting your hand over their head. And this particular dog had, its trigger was its ears.
And we weaned her off the Prozac, so she might get moody from time to time.
This dog's on Prozac for PTSD. You have some that when they retire, totally normal, regular, they can really turn into a pet, a household pet. My last military working dog, he actually went to a home and as a retirement, a home with kids, and he's been doing great. This particular dog is suffering from PTSD and anxiety based off of its military experience and based off of the loss of its handler as well. Rating-wise for this scene, I'm going to give it 10 out of 10. It's very realistic for a dog with PTSD and aggression issues, and with the trigger of touching the ears.
No, let's go.
It wouldn't really be realistic to send a dog on another dog. One, because we don't train that, because it would be more of a distraction, especially when it comes to military working dogs. And even as law enforcement, they wouldn't want that. With the dog not having training to do that, this would be more of a natural reaction versus training.
You're okay. You're okay.
With Sam being a German Shepherd, it is fairly common for a protection dog. Dog is very loyal. It is a great protector, and it is a dog that will give its life to protect you. This scene I would rate a 3 out of 10. Really, we would never send a dog on another dog.
Okay, Max, go search.
It is an option to have the dog search free of handler. One of the things with that is you do take a big risk, because you do have, like you had the kid with the ball behind a corner, there's a little bit less control. So normally you'll see a dog on a very long line, like 30 to 50 feet worth of a line, to be able to control a little bit better, just in case you do have that sort of situation. You see the dog, he indicates on the weapons. That's very common with an explosive dog. We do teach it black powder, which is in most weapons, and smokeless powder, which is in weapons as well. He probably missed that guy that was around the corner because he was overwhelmed from the odor of the weapons that were down there. My rating for this, for Max, is definitely going to be a 10 out of 10. Everybody has their way of searching, and that's one of the techniques, and he performed it very well. Based off of the clips that we watched today, my favorite scene is going to be the John Wick. We don't see that particular style happening with all that action, but it's amazing to watch those dogs.
Hey, I'm Lamont Christian, United States Army Command Sergeant Major, retired. And I had the honor and the privilege to serve as a drill sergeant, and then later on leading drill sergeants as the commandant for the US Army Drill Sergeant Academy. I'm back to look at some more boot camp scenes.
Get the down off of my obstacle! I will motivate you, Private Pyle! Quickly! Move it up!
And when I look at this, I kind of laugh a little bit just because, again, the realism is there. Lee Ermey, he was actually a drill instructor. POW became his pet project, so to speak. I never did it as a drill instructor or a drill sergeant or any of those capacities, but it did happen to me. When I went through basic training, my drill sergeant had selected me to be the platoon guide, and every opportunity that I might have had to sit down and take a break, it turned into, where's the platoon guide? And so I never got a chance to sit, and if the platoon messed up, it was my fault.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts? Didn't Mommy and Daddy show you enough attention when you were a child?
Yeah, you know, as unfortunate as this scene is, for that period of time, and even now, there's still some uncomfortableness when dealing with mental health and mental wellness. And so obviously here, Lee Ermey's character, you know, he wasn't necessarily equipped with understanding perhaps what should be done. But we've learned over time that there's certain ways that we can de-escalate situations. I mean, it's not a perfect scenario to say exactly what I would do in that moment, but going in, understanding what I know about mental, what I would call wellness, would find a way to bring my energy down so that when I approach the individual, their energy could come down.
Easy, Leonard.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this happens as well. You can see where all of that stress and whether it's post-traumatic stress or just stress on this guy's life, it brought him to this point right here. And it's something that the military has been trying to really work hard to, I would even just say eliminate. Even the organization that I'm a part of with the Boulder Crest Foundation, like everybody knows about post-traumatic stress, but we focus on post-traumatic growth and trying to help people to recognize that it's okay to not be okay and then do something about it and not be stuck in that place. I would say easy, a 9 for that time period during the Vietnam War.
Only hurts the first time. What we got here, you a quitter, boy? Boy, I know it's
You know, we look at this training right here, and it's called BUDS training or SEAL training, basic underwater demolition SEAL training. I'm, you know, Army, never been in the Navy, but I worked beside some guys who had served as Navy SEALs, where they're being hosed down and they're doing the flutter kicks. All of that is incorporated in some type of training, and whether it's SEAL training, Ranger school, anything that's what we would consider Tier 1 operators, the tip of the spear, and your special operating forces in their training. It's a little bit more physical than it would be in your basic combat training.
How you feeling? Oh yeah, dangerous. Feeling dangerous.
I'm looking for warriors! Keep count!
That was pretty realistic right there. I mean, you can see it's like in the middle of the night there, and they're shaking, they're cold. And this is one of those tough weeks. You always hear about it on TV and in movies where they talk about how Hell Week, a part where they're testing their mettle to see if they got what it takes. I mean, the attrition rate is somewhere between 75 and 80%. And then you look at the physical aspects of it. What you saw, a lot of these guys that was really dealing with possible hypothermia and things like that. They have them right there on the edge of the shoreline. They used to call that surf torture, but I'm aware now that they call it surf immersion. And it's really another one of those opportunities that as a Navy SEAL, you have to be prepared to be in the water, stay in the water, live in the water. And it's not necessarily to break them, but it's to find where their breaking point is. And if somebody finds themselves in that position where they quit, then they recognize that perhaps, just perhaps, they don't have what it takes to go into combat. I'd even rate this probably, and again, not being a Navy SEAL, I would probably say this is between a 9, if not a 10.
Welcome to the house of pain. Love my barracks night and day. Love my barracks night and day.
I mean, as humorous as this movie is, we're talking about kids. These are junior ROTC or cadets that basically it's familiarization with the military, right? Like they're not actually trainees, But this guy who's standing here, Major Payne, right? He is treating them as though they're recruits. He's bringing all of the things that he has gone through to bear with these kids.
What if this was a life or death situation?
But it's not a life or death situation.
It is now!
And this movie, like, it goes way beyond what would be allowed for someone to do with cadets in high school like this. The only thing that the junior ROTC programs are really designed for is to give them a sense of community, again, you know, service, and to familiarize them with the military way of life. You wouldn't have like live fire and live grenades and things of that nature. Some of them do have rifle teams where they might go and compete with what we call airsoft rifles and things, but nothing to where they receive combat training, because that's not the focus for junior ROTC programs. I would say this is probably about a 2. He'd be there one day, and then they would have to say, hey, you gotta leave, at least in today's time.
This is the AK-47 assault rifle, the preferred weapon of your enemy, and it makes a distinctive sound when fired at you, so remember it.
That's an iconic clip. A lot of people will often repeat that particular quote by Clint Eastwood in this movie. One of the things that the US military does not do is integrate live fire training where we actually shoot at our personnel at close quarter like this, just because of the safety factor, right? I'm not saying that it has not happened. It is definitely something that's not condoned.
The man cheated. I say he improvised. There's only one way to settle this.
Definitely something that could happen where they would fight in the pit during that time period. I think they were actually around the period of Grenada in the operation going into what's called Urgent Fury. My father actually was one of the participants in that. He was serving in the 82nd at the time. They're out at PT, they're doing their physical training, some warrior-based training, warrior ethos, and it's all about, you know, demonstrating that they're prepared to go to war. For a senior non-commissioned officer to fight an officer, it would probably create a problem with good order and discipline in that organization, because the ranks would, you know, begin to kind of fall apart. You'd have those that would be following behind the officer, then those that might follow behind the gunnery sergeant highway. In context for the period that the battle that they were getting ready to go into in Grenada, I would say is probably about a 5. Again, only because when he was shooting at them with live ammo,
we're in the wrong position.
And the thing here is, like, this is not boot camp or basic training, but it is training. Typically, organizations, before they can be certified to go to battle, they have to go through what we call combat training centers. And these combat training centers are by design set up to put organizations through all of the battle, what we would call medals, right? Their mission essential task list, everything that they are supposed to accomplish in order to successfully conduct battlefield operations.
Company.
So unfortunately here, the result of the Captain Sobel's lack of tactical awareness and his what I would call rush to failure, it just walked him right into an enemy ambush. While Sobel in this particular series might have been a great trainer, he didn't necessarily have the tactical combat experience, because most of these men didn't. World War II, we had people that were school teachers and bus drivers and milk delivery men that were pulled in to serve our country and serve in infantry positions. I am of the school of thought that it doesn't necessarily require that a trainer has to have combat experience in order to be a great trainer. I would say it's definitely realistic, especially being done at Camp McCall. Again, this series, Band of Brothers, takes a lot of the history from the actual people who participated in this experience. Basically, that's Army Airborne School. and they're getting their 5th jump. It takes 5 jumps to complete the airborne training. And so airborne training is some advanced training that you go to after you've completed basic training, and then you go and you learn your job skill, whatever that might be. So I actually enjoy the fact that these paratroopers are jumping as well because of my own connection. I served as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. And what I will tell you is that my experience is unique because I went through jump school when my father was an airborne instructor, commonly referred to as a like that. I would say a 10, but I'm gonna give it a 9 just because I wasn't there. This opening scene right here, you know, that's pretty realistic. Whistles during this time period was part of the uniform, and it was utilized to do exactly what this drill sergeant is doing, is to wake them up. There's periods of time where certain training methods, basically they get dropped. The lights are always gonna be one of those ways to wake them up.
When I say go, go!
What they're doing right now, commonly referred to as grass drills or guerrilla drills. Like a lot of these exercises and drills that we did for years, they were good in creating stamina and endurance, but it was really heavily filled with exercises that would really create injuries. We in the military, specifically the Army, have changed over the years to create fitness training that reduces injuries. Now, the good thing though is, you see they're wearing their winter fitness training uniform. And what I will tell you is, this was definitely one of the exercises that we would do to get warmed up, because it would be pretty cold.
The gig line runs down the seam of your shirt, through the edge of your belt buckle, down the seam of your zipper. See it, learn it, do it.
Lynn Whitfield's character as a drill sergeant is exactly right when she's talking about the gig line and the uniform. You know, one of the things that basic combat training is supposed to do is help a civilian, right, transform themselves into a soldier. And that's the same with the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, and in this case, it was just the gig line. But everything else about that in the background, you can see the uniformity and the way that the war lockers were set up, the PT uniforms hanging off the side, the bay itself, the bunks, the way that they were made, all of that uniformity and being able to pay attention to detail is what will help a soldier do better as they progress in the military and begin to learn more complicated tasks. So I would have to say that everything in this clip in the boot camp or basic training environment, this is about a 7. It was realistic for that time period in our military.
Most of you will not live to be in the mobile infantry. I am your senior drill instructor, Career Sergeant Sim. Suck it, Eckert!
Now we're talking in the future, and ironically, the military has a Space Force now. I used to use this way to explain to drill sergeant candidates when I was running the Drill Sergeant Academy that basic training or boot camp is pretty much going to stay the same from the past into the future. The training that we did for, you know, the Revolutionary War, using muskets in 1776, was the same training that we did in 1966, sending people to Vietnam with the M4 or the M16 rifle. It's the same training we'll do in 2036. How we train is what changes, right? We will still have to take an ordinary citizen and train them to be able to do the basic fundamentals of engaging targets, you know, properly breathing, getting a good sight picture. And even if we're using lasers.
Who here thinks they got what it takes to knock me down? Sir!
Looking at this, even when I was a drill sergeant myself, I never would try to take on a trainee. It was one reason why. As time went on and I got more wiser, that is, I understood that some of the recruits coming in might actually have a skill set that might be better than mine. I mean, you look at it now, you have UFC fighters, boxers, and you know, world-class wrestlers that might join the military. You didn't want to be embarrassed if one of these people came through and they had a lot more skill than you. I would have to give it a 5. I don't know if we're gonna be in this space, literally and figuratively, in this space in the future, but I would say again, what we train may change over time, but how we're able to do that is actually the thing that evolves.
Look down at your feet on my footprints.
The yellow footprints. That's something that the Marines do very well. Every Marine has put their feet on the yellow footprints, and you know, they have them lined up just like this. And so this is the beginning of the making of a Marine.
Are you in a terror cell? Are you now, or have you ever been a homosexual?
No, sir!
This movie was around 2005-ish, and was during one of those periods of the flex in the military where it was don't ask, don't tell was a policy. No matter what someone's sexual orientation was, that as long as they didn't openly display it, then they were okay, right? Even the fact that he asked in the beginning if he had ever been a homosexual during that time period, you couldn't even ask that.
Who do I report this to?
Just who the think you're talking to, recruit?
During that time period, the military really struggled with that don't ask, don't tell, and how to deal with it, right? Because it was definitely a social issue, and it made its way into the military ranks, but it's very realistic that this could happen in an environment where a DI is left to his own devices to do what he wants, and it could result in just this same activity and same behavior. I know in 1999, Barry Winchell was a private at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, as an example, and who was dating a transgender woman, and he was beaten to death, right, because of who he was having a relationship with. And so they repealed and removed the don't ask, don't tell policy. And around 2011, when they did that, that's what kind of helped create that shift and that change in the way the military actually dealt with individuals and their sexual orientation. It's become more normalized. I would tell you, for realism, this particular movie and that time period, I would say it's probably about an 8.
We have to clear up the mystery of Wachowski's missing $62.
Those barracks, that's actually how soldiers lived for years. They still have this flavor where it's an open bay, and you have, up to 60 personnel that live and spend all of their time in boot camp and basic training side by side like this. If you look at the barracks today in the military, they look like college dormitories. But most of the barracks, once they leave that environment, was still that way in World War I and World War II. A lot of these barracks were still around way into like 2000s.
Why the hell did you put back money you knew you didn't take?
Because I knew you did. I think inventing a crime that didn't exist to enforce your theories of discipline is Neanderthal in its conception.
Yeah, even myself, being a drill sergeant, I've never had anyone go against my training because I was real simple in the matter of I was hard, but I was fair. And I trained in a way that was close to being realistic. And so it was easy for me to be able to relate to the experience of somebody who was in a training environment, because basically I didn't want to forget where I came from.
It's also your duty to relieve me of my loaded weapon.
Oh, shoot, goddammit!
Having not been there during that time, I've heard stories about some of these types of things. This is a prime example of somebody who is out of control, has much deeper issues. We don't know their background, and so the result of not having a system in place that would allow his character as the sergeant to be able to find ways to be in a better space, it just lends itself to us recognizing that we had to do better and be better in order to take care of our service members. I would have to say I would rate this probably about an 8, again, because of the uniforms, the background, and everything in context as is happening in this movie clip. It's very likely and very realistic. I have a favorite comedic, a favorite serious, and probably a favorite dramatic clip from today, from boot camp and basic training scenes. Of course, my favorite comedic one would be, I would probably have to say, Major Payne. My favorite dramatic one, I would have to say, is Heartbreak Ridge. And even though it wasn't boot camp, it was still kind of a training environment. And then my serious one, I would probably have to say, again, the DI. Looking at these clips, again, reminds me of how this movie in particular try to capture the very essence of what it takes to create what we call a warrior, somebody that we're gonna ask to go into harm's way and serve our country and defend our nation in a way that they perhaps might not come back home.
My name is David Harris. I was a Special Forces Weapons Sergeant in 3rd Special Forces Group. I went to sniper school and as well as Mortar Infantry Leaders course. Today we're gonna look at explosions. He wasn't at a super high elevation, so his back blast was fine. He didn't have anyone behind him, so no one was going to be messed up by the rocket actually taking off. For this scenario, most of the rockets everyone's shooting is going to have back blast, which is just the fire or the explosion of the round taking off. So the more elevation you put, the more that fire is going to come out and burn your legs. Or if someone's right behind you, they're going to eat all that blast of the rocket going off. You can stand directly on the sides and shoot rockets like that. So the explosion shown in the scene hitting the helicopter is actually what it would look like. It wouldn't be some overwhelming, like a big fireball. Probably the reason that RPG was able to hit that is because it's point fired, which means it doesn't have something it's actually locking onto. It's not locked, it's just basically like a bullet. I point it in this direction, I fire at it. So it's harder to maneuver from. I would rate Black Hawk Down on a scale of 1 to 10 for realism, a 9. They pulled in a lot of resources from militarily, guys that were there. Like I know they used Rangers to actually do the fast rope scenes. He pulled the pin and he threw it, and then you saw the spool kick off as it was going and everything else. Yes, it was accurate. Is there anything they could have done? No, honestly, you want to stay out of hallways, stairwells, and like you don't really want to deal with ladders and things that change elevation because it's a harder thing to cover. And yeah, the guy was watching it, but the dude wasn't even seeing, he just threw it down. Yeah, and that's all they have to do, even in a stairwell. Like, you can't really do anything if he throws a grenade down on you. So the typical hand grenade time is about 4 to 5 seconds. Kill radius is about 5 meters, and the radius of injury is about 15 to 20. Fused variants can give an F1 grenade anywhere from 0 to 13 seconds. And yes, you can protect others by jumping on the hand grenade to save your buddies. It's ultimate sacrifice, honestly. It's actually a guy did that when I was in Iraq in 2007. A Marine did that, came in his Humvee, dropped it off a bridge, and he dove down on it. I would rate this movie a 9, jumping on the grenade and how the explosion went. It was very realistic. Nope, not at all. Them claymores would not do that much damage. Basically what a claymore is, it's a 1.5 pound of C4 with about 700 to 800 ball bearings on it. And you blow it up and it scatters and can go out. And the kill radius is about 50 meters. They use them to go defensive. You were designed to actually like get in your patrol base and put those out so guys couldn't sneak up on you. And then the other way of using them was in ambushes. You open up with those because they're going to produce the mass casualty. It's not blowing up, taking out 2 buildings. Pellets aren't going to do that. When we were in the old days of wars, we used flamethrowers to go after bunkers. So the standoff of that was like 75 meters. From what I know of the quad tube rocket launcher, that weapon system was designed so that we can get more standoff from the bunkers themselves. They were designed to be bunker busters, where you could get more standoff. That was up to about 150 to 200 meters. So now the guy didn't have to run up there with a flamethrower and gas on his back on a bunker where they were getting shot at. The rocket launchers weren't designed to shoot at moving targets. They were designed for bunkers, a stationary target. But if you were in a pinch, let them rip. They weren't heat-seeking. So they didn't have to pick up a heat signature. Just like we said with the RPGs, it's a point-and-fire weapon. So if anything's point-and-fire, I don't need, it could be used in any way I need it to be used. A blast from a grenade would not send two dudes doing somersaults into the air. They're not designed for that. They are, it's an area fire weapon, and honestly, those two dudes, because it's about a 5 to 15 meter kill zone, those dudes would have been dead on impact. They're gonna go up and out, and then that's why that 5 meters kill zone, if they're right on top of it within that zone, they're gonna get hit with a lot of fragmentation, which is just the pellets and everything flying in different directions. I would rate this a 3.
What's he doing?
I wouldn't do that, but yeah, okay. When you're attaching explosive to other objects, you have a couple of options. You have double-sided sticky tape. You put the tape on here, and then it's another piece of tape on the other side. So it's double-sided, so I can stick it. And then you have, the Claymore itself actually has 2 legs, prongs, that you pull down, and then they split like this. So you can actually have 2 legs and put it in and move it like a little bit up and down. Claymores weigh less than 6 pounds. You can put as much tape as you want as long as it holds, right? As long as it holds it up, it's gonna work. I would not use duct tape to attach any explosive to anything unless I was in a pinch and I had no other choices. It does look like an accurate explosion on the size and force. The guy who blew it up got messed up too, because it says, yeah, front toward enemy, but you're gonna eat some of that too. It's got a cone where it's 180 gonna come back towards you. So that's why you have to have the standoff that you want so you don't eat that overpressure and the actual concussion of the explosion. So him being jacked up too, yeah, I agree. I would rate this 6. And the reason why is because I honestly don't think that tape would have held up from the rounds impacting nonstop. I think he had 2 pieces of tape on there. You're gonna need a whole lot of that duct tape.
It's the root of all.
So the M14 mine is called the toe popper. A toe popper wasn't designed to blow a dude in half. It was designed to maim. Claymores, I'm trying to kill as many people as possible, as quick as possible. This is designed to maim one dude.
Jesus! David, don't move, don't move.
The toe popper was designed for when the pressure is applied, not released. So we all walk heel to toe and roll our feet, right? So you hit your heel, you roll, and boom. So as soon as you put the weight onto the toe popper, it's designed to go off. Because if it was as simple as you know you stepped on it, well then the weapon system wouldn't work. When I was in Afghanistan, if we found something that we thought was a mine, the Charlie would come up, and then I would be out there with my security, and he would look to see if it was command detonated, which means someone's actually calling to set it off, or if it was actually it's self-initiated, basically. You roll over it. Us, we bring our trucks up because we had jammers. So just because you don't see a wire doesn't mean the dude can't call in on his cell phone.
Twice around your body. Boom. Like that.
Come on, man!
So director Spike Lee actually pulled this account from a real-life Vietnam veteran that claimed this happened, but the events are disputed. That's not going to work in real life. The toe popper was designed as soon as pressure went on it. Let's throw that away. I'm gonna give you a rope and expect you to tie it around yourself without shifting any weight in any direction. That's probably unfeasible because you're moving. So once you start moving, weight's gonna shift a little bit. It should go off. So the first guy that stepped on the mine blew him in half. That's a big explosion, we would think. Couldn't have been a toe popper then, because the second explosion, shouldn't you get some of that? We didn't pull you that far off. It had to be 2 different type of mines because it's not enough. A toe popper wasn't designed to blow a dude in half. I would rate this a 4 because I don't believe that you could be yanked off the toe popper because it wasn't designed to go off when the weight was removed. The size of that explosion, yes, it was the right size.
Hold with 2 hands, President. Here it comes!
The depiction of the explosion itself, I would say, yeah, that was realistic. The direction he held it in was probably the best, because anything else, it would have hit the car more. It may not set you on fire, but you're gonna feel it. I would stop the vehicle for a split second, fire the rocket, like I would have everything ready, and then soon as I'd be like, okay, stop, fire, and then we drive. That would make me the most accurate at that point.
I lost the rocket launcher. You lost? How do you lose a rocket launcher?
Because the heat was on his neck, so he dropped it. I would tell you if I fired it and then I felt the heat coming up on me and I'm not used to it, like I wasn't expecting it, I probably would let it go too. I would rate this 4.
Aim. Shoot!
Would that work in real life? Actually, yes. As long as that grenade is on that arrow and it holds onto it the whole time in flight, you're good. The issue would be how good you're shooting with the arrows, how fast, the time in flight of how far you need to shoot that arrow. The effect you would have with an arrow is probably distance. The biggest thing would be distance, how far I could throw it. Because the arrow bow is going to get my arrow go further faster than my arm is going to get it. The grenade is not designed to set fires everywhere and it's burning. Now, if it's secondary explosions, maybe, but not like that, no. You threw the grenade blew up, and it set his gas tank up, and then his gas tank blew up. like, I would need all these things to happen, which could be extremely lucky, but I doubt it. A grenade cannot flip a motorcycle over like that. They're not designed for that. They're fragmentation, so it probably won't stop the vehicle. At best, you'll injure the people on the vehicle, and if it doesn't kill them, they'll just drive the vehicle off. So it's not designed for stopping the vehicles. I would rate this a 3, because all the explosions and all that stuff, it wouldn't happen. I've used 40 Mike grenade launchers with the Mark 19 and the Mark 47, which are basically machine guns, but they're designed for 40 Mike grenades. I've used those on top of trucks a lot, and those are made because of area fire weapons in mountains. You want to cover more ground. It's not designed to have that kind of impact on explosion. It's 40 Mike. It's not a huge round. Like you would need a bigger round, like you're talking Gustav. HE round is carrying way more punch than make it blow up. Or you're gonna hit that thing with like 12 rounds straight, a 40 Mike. I've seen guys use them for breaking contact. You get shot at and you're trying to get away, so you may have it. So actually, they use that exact kind of grenade launcher, a 6-shooter, that you actually crank it, and he shot 6 rounds and took off so he could get some kind of cover fire down. 40 Mike's not really designed to use up close, but he didn't just point shoot it at people. When it was time for that, that went away, he grabbed his rifle. His weapon manipulations was very smooth, very fluid. The reloading of the weapon system, he was on point with. I rated a 6. I don't think the explosion would have did that to the plane, like unless it was like we talked earlier, secondary explosion. I like the movie though. You're not outrunning that explosion. Like the explosion itself would be almost simultaneous. Unless you set every single different explosion on a different piece of time. So you have time fuse and det cord. Well, chances are you're gonna set everything on det cord because you want it all to go. Time fuse, that doesn't make any sense to do it that way, unless you plan on someone trying to outrun the explosion. So if your helicopter is in the line of sight of a RPG, if you're 200 meters, it's coming hot. Chances of dodging it as a full helicopter, probably gonna be slim, but if you could get on it early, yeah, depending on where he was aiming, you might be able to get out the way. They'll know to do maneuvers, like they'll slow down, speed up. Then they also have flares they'll drop, because if it's heat they're looking for, dropping flares will hopefully get it off of you. If someone threw something in the middle like that, in between the rocket and the helicopter, probably blow up, but all the shrapnel and everything and all the overpressure still is gonna go into that helicopter. So you're not gonna get away unscathed. I would rate this clip a 2. The chances are that helicopter not receiving anything or not even rocking from the explosion, not even like losing itself a little bit, that ain't gonna happen. Flashbang grenade is designed to get momentum or get the guys back on their feet. Like they know we're out there, they're pulling defense, we're about to go in. What can we do to get them to be like, what is that? Like look over and be like, what is going on? Say we're using a 3-banger or a 5-banger, not a single banger, right? Well, he's hiding behind a dresser. Okay, we know he's behind the dresser. We want to flush him out from behind it. Throw that flashbang over the top of there. And let it pop on him a couple of times. He may come out of that corner because there's no point of us going in if we can get him to come out. It went under the vehicle, which was going to stop some of the light, but the explosion was pretty intense. We wouldn't go in there if it was doing that. We always wore eye and ear protection. Ours was more like a flash, like pop, 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 because we could be in the room with it. Like this one, it seemed like it was an aggressive explosion to make them be more disoriented. Because you're not wearing ear protection or anything, you're ringing of the ears, your head would be more a fog. Your balance, depending on how close you are to it, how much you took of the pressure of that explosion. When I was doing a lot of stuff in the CRIF, like when we trained there, we used 9-bangers, which meant it went off 9 times. So it went pop, 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 pop. So we don't want to just throw it, let it go off 9 times and then sit outside. Because now he gets back on his feet. Like he's not stunned no more. As soon as he gets stunned, we need to be on top of him. I rate this 8.
Broken arrow! I say again! Broken arrow!
This scene portrays the Battle of Ia Drang during the Vietnam War, and the Americans were so overrun they had to call Broken Arrow for air support. When a soldier calls in a broken arrow, that basically means you're being overrun your position and you need as much air support as possible.
We have planes stacked up at every 1,000 feet!
Because they actually told the commander where to stack, how much he had, what he had. Like, those are real messages you would tell your guy. You don't want to send 2 planes at the same elevation. So you stack them. So that way they're flying in their own, they have their own lane that they don't have to worry about hitting other planes. You may stack them because of the weapon systems they have. Like, hey, I need this to drop before this. If you are being overrun, I've seen plane go offensive once, ever, much as it takes.
Get down!
You also have a thing with mortars and this called danger close. If I'm being overrun, at some point I may tell you, hey, I need you to drop this close. And usually when you're gonna drop this like danger close, they're gonna ask for the commander's initials. We need someone that is in charge saying, okay. I rate this as about a 9. I thought these explosions were realistic because from what I've seen of drops, with the grass and everything like that, depending on what you were dropping, I'm pretty sure it's how it probably looked real life. My favorite explosion I watched today was Commando, just because I think it was over the top. The most realistic explosion I watched today was the Black Hawk Down, when they hit with the rocket. It seemed the most realistic for what I've seen on combat rotations. If you like this video, why not click on the next one?